Hey everybody, so I want to give you 4 tips for searching for grants. Let's get started. Hey everybody, Tiffany here with Boss on the Budget. I help new and small nonprofits get up and running. I want to talk to you today about one of my favorite topics to talk about, which is grant writing. So I have an online community of aspiring grant writers, and one of the top questions that I get is, how do I find grants? Where do I look? I have a couple videos which give you advice for where to find grants, but I wanted to do this video to give you tips during that grant search. So ways to help your grant search be more effective. So I wanted to give you 4 tips today. But before I do that, if you're interested in my free grants worksheet that helps you find grants in your local area, so when you're first starting and you don't know where to look, I have a process that I use. It's really easy to figure out how to find grants in your local community, right? You can find up to 20, 25 potential grants just by using that worksheet alone. And if you want to steal my strategy, if you want to figure out how I find grants and I never have to pay for it, you can check out my course. The link is in the description box below, Finding the Right Grants for Your Nonprofit. Just hit the link below and check it out. But today, let's talk about 4 tips to maximize your grant search. So the first tip that I will give you is never, ever, ever, ever go for the big fish. If you're new and you're small, the worst thing you can do is just start shopping for grants for $100,000 or going automatically for federal grants. Number one, most funders, if you're newer and you're smaller, are not going to give you a lot of money, if they give you any at all, if they don't have any kind of relationship with you, if you don't have like a good standing in the community, not many people know you. They just don't trust enough to give you that amount of money. So don't immediately go for the big fish, okay? Also, for federal government grants, a lot of people assume that's where most grants come from. When they're just starting out, they automatically go to, oh, I need a government grant. Help me find a government grant. And I say, run, don't get government grants. No, don't run, but just hold off on it, okay? Federal grants are incredibly complicated and they're incredibly competitive. So the best way to be disappointed in the beginning during your grant writing strategy is to go out only for federal grants. Start small, get your groove going with small and local grants first, and then once you get like to a certain standing, then start looking into federal grants. But also remember, there's a lot of federal funding available that comes through the state. So even before you jump to the federal government, you may want to check out your local or state government because they administer a lot of federal programs. So it's through the state, but it's still federal money. So just remember that. That's the first tip. Don't start big, start small, and pay attention to your local community. Again, my grants worksheet can help you figure that out, but pay attention to who's around you. Who are the stores around you? What businesses are headquartered in your areas? What about your community foundation? All of that good stuff. Start there because that'll be easier for you and you can graduate to the big fish later. So the second piece of advice I'll give you is don't box yourself in. So a lot of times people will come to the group and they'll say, I need a grant for an after-school program that focuses on music and the arts. Or they'll say, we have a karate program. So where do I find grants for a karate program? Or I have a Christian school. Where do I find grants for a Christian school? And it's good to be specific about who you are and who you serve, but it's not as helpful when you're looking for grants. So it's rare that you're going to find a funder who's specifically interested in the same thing you're interested in. What you're mostly going to find is funders who are interested in broad categories like education, like health, like social services. Now there are some funders who are connected to an issue and are very specific about who they want to give money to. I'm not saying they're not, but you'll be more effective in your grant search if you broaden your search and pay attention to broader categories. So don't just look for grants for after-school programs, okay? Don't be that specific. Yes, that should be included, but think more broadly about the categories for which your program fits into. So think about arts, community service, civil service, education, environment, those larger categories. And then when you start graduating to paid services, they're grouped in those categories anyway. So it's just important to train yourself in understanding these are the main categories that we fit into. And also remember that if you are an after school program, you may not just do education. There may be other components of your program. So you have to, again, think about all the different categories that you're interested in or that you may relate to, not just what seems the most obvious. So the third tip relates to what we just talked about, and it's about finding the right keywords when you're doing your search. So what are the buzzwords or the key topics that represent your program? Is it education? Is it mental health? Is it foster care? Is it adoption? What are those keywords, even within those broader categories that we just talked about, that are important that you should be paying attention to? And that'll be important when you want to do keyword searches, when you eventually graduate to a paid grant search service, if that's what you want to do. It's important to have those keywords that may be able to pick up also some of the grants that you're interested in. And also, it may be important because maybe there's a corporation that's interested in foster care and adoption. And if you know that they're interested in that, you know to look to see if they have a fund or a foundation that supports that. So it helps you figure out who the connections are and where to look, and helps give you a little bit more guidance. One way you can also think about it is, what are the outcomes that you hope to see? An easy example is an after-school program. So the outcomes that you have for your clients or for the people you serve, you want them to have improved mental health. You want them to have financial independence. You want them to have career readiness. Those kinds of things are outcomes that you're looking for, but you don't necessarily, you may not call yourself a career readiness program, or you may not call yourself a mental health program, but you are interested in improving those things. Well, they can still be related to grants. If there's a grant that focuses only on grief, and I've seen some of those types of grants, they only focus on grief counseling for children. Well, you wouldn't consider yourself grief counseling, but what if you work in an underserved area where a lot of the work you do is around trauma, especially around trauma for kids who've experienced loss to gun violence or disease or something like that? That is not directly related to who you are as a program, but it's still a component of who you are. So it's important to have those important keywords so you don't miss things when you're looking for grants. The fourth tip I want to talk about is, don't automatically jump for a paid grant search service. So there are a couple grant search services out there, and check out the description box. I have some examples there, and I also have a blog where I kind of compare all of them. But there are the same grant search services that you'll see that they serve a different type of demographic, right? So some of the searches are for more experienced people. Some are for people who don't have the time to do a lot of searching and digging. It just depends. But when you're first starting out, don't waste your money just yet. Get into the groove of understanding what you're looking for, what type of assistance you want, what type of funders you're interested in. Get yourself together with that first. Take advantage of free options first, and then once you have kind of some understanding of what you want, then go into a paid search service. So there are a lot of ways you can find grants for free. The first one is my grants worksheet that I talked about, but you can also use some of these search services who have free components of their services. So biggest example is the Foundation Directory online through candid.org. The link is below. You can do a basic free search of every foundation in the US, and then they have some international organizations and foundations on there as well. You can do a simple search and figure out who's in your geographic area. Now, that doesn't mean it's easy, so you're going to get all of them, and you're going to have to do the work to figure out who's a good fit, but there's still ways you can find funders for free that you wouldn't have to pay just yet if you're not very sure about how you want to approach grant writing. The other piece is the Foundation Directory online has partnered with multiple libraries across the country. Your public library has a subscription to their paid service, which is extremely robust. You can find related funders, you can find who they gave money to, how much they typically give to people. You can find that using their your top paid service, and they lend that service to local libraries. So every local library in most communities, there's at least one who has a subscription for that, and you can go to your library and just get on there and check it out. Now, it's limited because it's one library in your area, and some people that means it's 2 hours away, but there are still options and ways to do this. And as I mentioned before, I have a course where I teach you how to find grants for free, period. Whether you're small, whether you're established, you can find grants without paying anything. It just depends on how tenacious you are. It just depends on if you're really a detective like me, or you're just a little lazier and you just want somebody to do some of the work for you. It just depends. So I hope those tips were helpful. I wish you best of luck in your grant search. If you have any questions for me, you can visit me at www.bossonabudget.com, and I'll see you in the next video.